Welcome to New Polity Podcast. We're here to teach you to rise and grind, to get that bread.
To make that cabbage
to get
stew.
that bread, because we know that a lot of you guys are feeling down, feeling like you're being cut out of this economy. Maybe people have told you to learn to code, but don't worry, right? The problem is your lack of motivation, and we're here to motivate you to make that money. We're selling skincare products. I have some in this cup. You'll glow like the sun by wearing this. So buy a bunch from us, get into debt, and sell it to your friends. Commercialize your this is right. Yeah, commercialize your relationships.
Commodify your relationships.
New Polity.
We practice that.
Oh boy, sorry. So we're here to talk about money once more.
Yeah, well, I think it is kind of funny to talk about money in an age when people just lost a lot of it.
Yeah, sorry guys, that's rough. Maybe the government will give you another $1,000 if you stay in your home. Be
Sorry,
good.
I shouldn't be laughing. It was just the worst idea. You know, like that was designated to ensure that the state stayed in power and the wealthy got wealthier. Because once you give people money and then shut down all the small businesses, then where else do you have to spend the money other than corporations?
Would it sound disingenuous if I told you that I hadn't thought about that?
Oh, really?
That's what happened? You kidding me? That sucks.
You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah,
I mean, I joked at the beginning. God forgive me. I did joke at the beginning of this pandemic that Bezos did it.
Oh, yeah.
Because
I'm sure his lobbyists flooded DC ensuring that it stayed down the longer.
Well, it's just some weird
longer.
things. Let's not get too conspiratorial here, but let's point out that Amazon just became a pharmacy prior to the delivery of
good timing on their part.
Just quite incredible timing before the vaccination comes out. And that the coronavirus just happens to only kill people who probably don't have Amazon Prime accounts.
It's incredible.
Okay, so anyways, we're talking about
incredible.
So we're talking about money today, and I came in a skeptic. I'm still a skeptic. I don't like money. I tend to lose it. We talked about this last time.
Yep.
Okay, but what we essentially discussed last time is that there's a Christian moderation of the use of money that keeps it from being idolatrous, right? And it keeps us spending it. And this is, I think, the crucial point that I don't think anyone actually thinks when they think like, what does Jesus say about money? They think things like, maybe give to the poor and maybe don't be greedy, right? And that's true.
Yeah.
But the point is, you've got to burn the stuff.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to keep it in a box.
No.
You're not supposed to keep it in a bank account. You're not supposed to think about investments all the time as if the point of money is to make money, which is to make money, which is to make money. It's not the point. That's boring. That's content-less. That's a life without adventure. You might as well die now. It's Christmas. It's Christmas time. I have the Christmas spirit.
Just look at that sweater.
This is my money sweater. I'm going to try to wear this sweater every time we talk about money, even if it's a different conversation. If it turns to money, I'm grabbing this thing.
Yeah, we'll keep it in a box right over there in the studio. Yeah.
Anyways, so but what Jesus says is that you've got to spend the stuff, right? And what we kind of devise as our rule for money in that regard is that saving money is not an end in itself.
Oh, it's no end at all. So people primarily today define money as a store of value, a medium of exchange, and the last one. What were the first two I named? A store of value.
Bro, you're doing the dissertation. Why am I supposed to?
A store of value, a unit of account, and a medium of exchange. But the latter two, the scholastics fully affirm that it is a sort of measure, that unit of count that evaluates goods, which has some huge problems that they tried to mitigate, but that's what money did. The other was that is a medium of exchange. So this was part of the reason why they tried to make money as valuable as possible so that it was most akin to barter as possible. So that you're trading a real good for a real good.
So like gold, beautiful coins.
Yeah. That sort of thing. Cattle. The store of value, they absolutely and universally condemned as
Really?
was a defining feature of money. They said that this was inevitable part, like a good type of money is going to be able to hold its value for a while, something like metal. But this was only a supporting characteristic of money that propped up the two ends of money, being that unit of account and being that medium of exchange. But following Jesus Christ, they said, of course, the end of money is not to save up, to build larger storehouses than we had before.
Right. I mean, it's just stupid. Like, you would know that if you were talking about anything besides money.
Bread. I love this example because people often talk about King Midas and it's like, oh, he had so much gold. He like died of starvation. Well, what if you replaced everything with all his gold with bread? Well, that's too much bread. It'd get moldy. He couldn't eat it all. And it's all kind of silly too. I mean, everything in life has to have a golden mean into itself. And I think that's Aristotle's point when he's telling King Midas's story, because King Midas was a real historical figure, right? You know,
these people haven't read Aristotle. I haven't read it. I don't know who he is. Let's not talk about Aristotle.
Okay, sorry.
Gosh, can you imagine a podcast about Aristotle?
That'd be so boring.
I'd rather die. All right. Merry Christmas. Okay, so we ended our discussion with saying that to use money, you don't save, or if you do, right, it's not for its own sake. It's only for the sake of a known expenditure.
Yeah, save up. If you want to buy a building in your dilapidated Rust Belt town, save money for a while, but know that it is for that dilapidated building in your dilapidated town.
And don't lie about it. People lie about this all the time where they're like, I am just saving up so that I can do good.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that's interesting because I haven't seen you do any good.
This is the real fault with Dave Ramsey, who has helped with many.
Oh, we're naming names.
Well, I'm going for it. Dave Ramsey, everybody.
Listen up, Dave.
Dave, we have a message for you.
Can I say something about Dave before we critique him?
Oh no, I want to say something nice about him too. I actually really like your get out of debt method. Like, start small. It's a psychological problem that puts you like in debt in the first place. So, build up your psyche, defeat the small debts first, go up from there. I like that.
Can I say something negative?
Oh, go for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Dave, I'm highly skeptical.
I've never been in debt, actually. I have to admit.
I'm highly skeptical, just as a characteristic of my person, so that insofar as you're telling me to do things, I'm doubtful. Sorry, Dave. No, but we were talking about Dave's advice.
So Dave's advice.
What's the adage?
His adage is live like no one else now so that you live like no one else later.
I think that's right.
Or
what Dave means by that is he's advising people to get out of debt, and he's saying something like this. Yeah, to save, right? But his point, because it's a Christian message, or he's attempting to be one, is that if you can save now, right, and if you can get rid of your debts now, then
stockpile a lot of cash now.
Then later, you will be able to give. Use the term give, like no one else. You will be able to bless others with your money. I mean, you've heard this sort of talk. I think it's more popular in Protestant circles. Catholics,
no. Catholics fall prey to it too. But I think that's right. You do hear it a lot more in Protestant circles. And the idea is just generally like, oh, I'm young now. I got to save up my money. Oh, I just can't wait to be generous when I'm old. But now when I have my whole life ahead of me and I don't know what my money is going to be for, then I should just have it so that I have it for anything.
Well, right. What Jacob's saying is like the trouble with the mentality is that it doesn't build a habit of giving and a habit of spending from the beginning. Now, with habits of soul, we'll do some very brief one-on-one stuff, right? A habit is a power of the soul, so something that we're capable of. And we build that capacity through action, right?
It's disposition, if you want to think about it kind of really simply. It's like you have to train your soul to be disposed to doing one thing or another. Right. You brush your teeth every day. At first you're like, I don't like brushing my teeth every day. And then next thing you know,
Jacob learned to brush his teeth last week. That's why.
And my mommy promises me that if I keep it up, I won't even know that I'm brushing my teeth in the morning or at night. So weird.
That is a weird one. But think about courage, right? Like, no one would in their right mind say, save up your acts of courage now so that you can be courageous later, right? You would be like, oh, that's stupid, because if you're not practicing courage in little things, if you're not practicing courage wherever it comes, how are you going to be disposed to be courageous when you're really called upon to be courageous?
Exactly.
You wouldn't have the guts. You would shrink. If I can't say, okay, I'm going to talk to my neighbor who's being annoying and tell him to please stop. If I can't do that in my young life, how in my later life am I going to be able to face, the firing squad or whatever it is?
Absolutely. Or even like take a really
probably the
like
firing
hilarious.
Squad.
Yeah, probably.
I'm going by firing squad.
I don't think I'm going to have a choice.
Merry Christmas.
You're on fire, man.
It's the Christmas spirit.
But take even one more like crazy example.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you think that you're going to actually have the habit of making a free throw if you say, I'm just going to save up like practicing them later down the line? It's like, you're not going to have that. You're going to have to learn that habit later down the line.
Right.
You just can't do it. And it's not just like it's a game. Like your soul is on the line.
Right.
And as Christ says, you never know.
You could die.
When you could die.
Exactly.
That's pretty much exactly his words.
Killed by firing squad. We're not going to keep this bit up. I'm done.
And so this is why it's really important. And so when the guy who's made his millions is, at the end of his life, still trying to make millions, even though he's made more money than he could ever spend or even know how to spend, he's going to keel over his spreadsheets and die, and we will all unanimously say together, he died doing what he loved.
Which is a really good point, because when you say this is what habits are all about, you are always building up a habit of some kind. It's just either going to be a vice or a virtue.
That's right.
Virtues are the good habits, vices are the bad habits. So by saying, save that habit of giving, of spending for later, it's not that you exist in this neutral territory of waiting. And this is one of those, again, I keep coming back to this, but one of the absurdities of liberalism is it keeps on telling us that we can have these neutral spaces where our souls are not on the line and where God has nothing to do with it.
That's right.
It's in politics. It's in the nature of money itself. And here we see it again in this presumably prudent advice to hold off on developing the virtues for a later date. Now, we can get into why I think people think that's sensible, and we can discuss those reasons. But for right now, what I want to point out is just that the Christian is under the obligation, everyone is under the obligation, to begin right now building the virtuous habits that are necessary to deal with money. I think one of the things that prevents Christians from doing that is they don't realize that there are virtues associated with money. It's a particular part of our contemporary world and contemporary philosophy that when we think of virtue, right, the only thing maybe that we think of when we think of money is generosity, right? Like that's the virtue. And then what's the bad thing? It's greed. But when you look back to the medievals, especially with St. Thomas Aquinas, he had a whole thick range of virtues that were
particularly designated for the proper use of money.
Right, exactly. That these are habits of soul, powers, capacities that we are obligated to perfect from the moment that we can act. All right, and since we're all big boys and we can all act, we should be doing them now, not later. Now, some of these virtues require having the money in order to use them.
Yeah, so we'll
talk about that.
So there's really 5 virtues that we want to start with going through. And today we'll talk on beneficence. But the others are liberality, almsgiving, magnificence, and temperance. Temperance is only, the others are very much focused on money itself. Temperance, not as much. But and magnificence is the only one of the 4 that actually requires having a lot of money. The rest is any amount of cash at all.
You find a penny, you pick it up, and you are obligated by the virtues.
Boom.
Or by God to have virtues.
And all virtues are is God written on your soul. As St. Maximus the Confessor said.
Virtues are just a big smooch. Big smooch from the big guy.
Well, now you're sounding like an evangelical. That's
I'm a
nice.
theologian, actually.
That's nice. Yeah. That's nice. I like it.
So beneficence. Break it down. I hear that you know how to speak foreigner languages.
Well, beneficence comes from a Latin compound word, which only really means do-gooding. So
I think to make it hip with the youth,
yeah,
we should just talk about do-gooding.
Do-gooding.
Then everyone on the TikTok will dance about it. So do-gooding.
Yeah, what is that skincare thing that you're drinking? Actually, yeah,
this is the route. This is a route to financial freedom. Is what it is.
Any alcohol in it?
I don't know, man.
That's all right.
I mean, like you lock down the nation, right? You give everyone $1,000.
Of course, liquor sales are going to go up by 70%.
Oh no, they ban liquor. I mean, this is just bleach. Merry Christmas. I'm sorry. Beneficence. Do-gooding.
Do-gooding. Yeah. So let's think about this. Every virtue has a vice that opposes it. Or multiple vices that oppose it. In the case of beneficence on do-gooding, the contrasting vice is scandal. Actually,
that makes no sense.
Makes a little bit of sense.
All right, well,
think about it like this.
Yeah.
Scandal is the perception of doing ill.
Right.
And primarily, why is that so dangerous? Scandal is so dangerous because it gives people a false perception of who God is and what he's like. So we think about maybe the clerical abuses that we've had to deal with in the church.
Been scandalized by.
We've been scandalized by. What does that mean precisely?
Yeah.
That we see the results of it. People leaving the church.
Yeah.
People hating the church. Why? Because it gave people a false perception of what the church actually is and who God in his ultimate and grand charity is. Scandal is that false perception. And so when we find the vice that opposes, that virtue that opposes that vice of giving a false perception, beneficence is giving the proper perception of who God is and what his church is.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Every good gift comes from above, from the Father of lights.
Amen. So do-gooding, beneficere, do well, is actually something that actually demands something positive.
Yeah.
So something that I love that you brought up before is the motto of Google, the old motto of Google.
I want to do this part. I have so little that I can contribute to the money discussion that you have to let me. All right, so Google. It's a little cliche to be mad at Google. It's like being mad at like the Leviathan. They're just so big. But I'm going to do it anyways. Google, if you're listening, they had a board meeting where they decided on their motto.
Early days.
Early days. And they decided it would be clever to use the motto, "Don't be evil." And their defense was that, they saw other companies doing, bad, nebulous sort of things, and that they didn't want to be like that. But what I think is fascinating about the choice of that title is that it is typically a attempt to avoid the positive, right? So
it's adirectional.
Right, exactly. Like, it's not saying to be good. It's simply saying to not be evil, right? Now, what the call of beneficence shows is that is an insufficient motto for a company and also an insufficient way to live, because it is not adequate to avoid evil. One must actually be good, right? Do good. And in fact, when one tries to live with this neutral sphere of like, well, we're just not going to do the evil things, right? One ends up actually doing evil. Why? Because there's this thing within Catholic moral theology that we call the sin of omission, right? It is evil to omit the good you ought to do. So Google, in their attempt to have a catchy motto, essentially undoes it within the motto itself. So I liked to translate their motto as Google, be evil through the sin of omission. And if you look at the history of the company, I mean, this is what happens, right? It's like they set themselves up with this adirectional, non-beneficent sort of pat on the butt that sends them forward into the world. And what do they end up doing? selling our information. They end up enslaving people to addicting pornography and media without
and lying about it,
and totally
saying
lying
Disney
about it.
Plus is the most searched for term in the U.S.
Yeah, not porn, but the
it's like what is it, 45 million?
I mean, not to
more
mention
searches
their
a day?
yeah, not to mention their sort of dubious relationship with China and censorship and everything else. It's just like they, in setting themselves up as the people that don't do evil, end up being evil because they don't have this virtue of beneficence, which is to have a positive good in mind, to bless others in particular. And this is the way I think that the virtue of beneficence is really about being an image of God.
Yeah.
God is the one who blesses us, right? He only does good. It's really hard for us to like grasp this because all of our examples are broken human people that sometimes do good. But God isn't like that. He's the one that always unceasingly does good, right? Yeah. And we are supposed to imitate that. And the reason that it's considered as one of those virtues that moderates the use of money is because it gives, and not just money, wealth, right? But
that's an important distinction we'll talk about in a second.
But it just gives it all its positive direction.
Yeah.
And it reinforces what we've said before, that it is sinful, it is wrong, it lacks beneficence to save money if all you're doing is saving money. Right. Because it doesn't have that positive good. What you're essentially doing is not being evil with your money, right? But as we've already said, like that's totally insufficient. And in fact, especially it becomes very clear with money, right? Because what is it to not spend $100,000, right? It's to deprive others of it as a source of wealth.
And we even say that about, what is it? It's scandal. It's scandalizing because you hear about these crazy dinners. People went out and they spent, $6,000-$7,000, $27,000 on dinner, and you just get scandalized by it, or use $100 bottle cooking wine, and you get scandalized by hearing that.
You have different friends. I've never heard this. But yeah, I would be scandalized.
Yeah. And so these are, but it's not wrong to say, some people say, well, we've made that money, so we have the ability to use it how we want. And that's just not how our Christian cosmos is set up. God created it in a certain way. If we're not living in accord with the way that he created it, then we are actually being unjust, doing ill, even if hurting people.
Even if you can technically say, oh, I'm not hurting anyone with this this lavish expense, or I'm not hurting anyone by not spending this, just by saving it up. That's not really the way the economy works. I mean, both our actual economy, but also the kind of divine economy. It's like, when you store value and sit on it, people suffer.
Well, there's a couple of things. Maybe this is going down too far into the rabbit hole, but I think it's worthwhile. I like rabbits.
Got to get that rabbit. Got to get that bread. Go ahead.
The first thing is that we talk about trickle down economics, quite a lot, and a lot of people.
I never do. I make it a point.
I've heard you talk about it. Don't lie to my face, Mark Barnes.
All right. Trickle down economics.
There's a few different things to say about it. So one is that, well, if people spend money, then money really does go around, and that does happen. And you have all these crazy dudes going out on their yachts, and they're spending, how many thousands of dollars every day, and that money does get circulated in the economy, and so it does create more jobs, more people are put to work. But you need to think about it like that, about this, excuse me. What type of jobs are these people getting? Are they jobs that would only ever arise in a liberal economy, in an economy where they're servants, where they're in the service sector, and therefore, just as they sound, where they are servants, where they're not actually owning anything? Where does that money exactly go? Are they giving it to the same places? Is it to the middle class, which is now becoming more of the upper class? How is that money actually distributed? And then the second thing that you have to think about is that person's own soul. And this is what you're talking about with the divine economy, is that if on the one hand you have a material inequality that starts to develop, and one that is of ownership, particularly of owning productive property, where you're not slaves to someone else or at the mercy of somebody else's spending even. Then on the other side, you have to be able to think, am I actually using my money? And I think this is an important thing, like, is in the way in which you're separating yourself from money, building up virtue or not. So if we had the first, I mean, in summation, because we're going down in so many different ways, so many of these rabbit holes, our first rule of money, which we talked about in the last podcast, is money is a placeholder, so always know what it's saving a place for. The second rule of money is to use your money in such a way is that you appear like unto the Lord your God. And the third is give so in such a way that use your money in such a way that you become a saint.
Right.
And that third thing is probably the clincher, because most of us think about what should we do with our money in terms of systems, bigger tax system, the free market at hand.
Yeah, and that's so true. And I think that it's really sad that there is no focus on personal virtues anymore, because it leads to we talked about this last time, this total lack of creativity on the part of the rich. Who have this money, and their answer to how to spend it is basically to turn to some system to take care of it for them. So you hear this on the right. People are like, well, what I spend and how I spend it and where my money goes is totally dictated by the forces of the market. Like, I'm just, you totally remove yourself from any responsibility for your actual use. And you just say that the market takes care of my money. Or on the side of someone more on the left, it's like the government should just tax me. Like we talked about Warren Buffett saying that. And it strikes me like William Kavanaugh talks about this, where he says like what that does is it just increasingly means that money itself becomes the god of our society, because we're not actually answering the question of what it's for, right? We are just thinking about its distribution as a vague and abstract thing that we aren't in charge of, that other systems are in charge of.
Yeah, so it's a god insofar as it exists for its own sake,
right? And
that it's in control and we are not.
Exactly, yeah. And he says, Kavanaugh talks about how when there's a recession, what do they tell you to do? Spend money. On what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Just feed the beast the money that it's hungry for to make the economy move. And this is what's so perverse about a society that disconnects money from the actual personal virtue by which it's for something in particular, right? Is that you end up with a system of value that doesn't actually look at the personal acts that people are doing, right? So you could restore an economy and you could get money moving and you could get people back to work, and all of those words could be true. And you as a wealthy person who's contributing to this through his taxes and through his obeying market forces can feel good. Like, oh, I'm making the economy move. And then you can peel it apart and say, okay, so what are we actually doing? And it's like, oh, this is entirely based on porn. We're investing in porn, making porn, selling porn, moving porn. Porn got us out of the recession. And it's like, that's terrible. You live in a terrible society. But what money allows us to do is to speak about our actual actions as if they don't matter, or rather to not speak about them at all, to remove ourselves from it so that we can have a whole functioning economy and a whole world, and the classes are all doing their different things. But when you actually get to what we're doing, namely, what are we going to answer for when we approach the throne of Christ, right? We can't go to him and say like, oh, don't worry, Jesus, I got the economy moving and rolling and I got us out of that recession and I made a bunch of jobs. Because he's just going to be like, what were the jobs? What did you do? What did you buy? What did you sell? What virtues did you establish? Like those are the questions that matter. But we've created a world in which we can pretend that the movement of money itself is somehow virtuous.
I think that's totally right. And even when you the few, oh man, it hurts even to say this, but the few Christian investment firms don't even think about it all that carefully as well. So I know like that a number of them, I guess I shouldn't name names. Should I do it?
I don't know. I mean,
I don't want to. Oh, name one. I know in some cases these investment firms just say, we go through and we ensure that in the ETFs and the basket of stocks that we invest in, that there aren't any porn companies in there at all. I don't know if they actually do it or not. It's such a complicated thing that I actually tend not to believe them, because a lot of the companies that they still invest in are somehow still tied to the porn industry. Just as an example of one, ludicrously awful way in which the market moves. But if you go online, I will name names. If you go online to like the major investment portfolios for Ave Maria investments, what's number one on their list? Visa, a usury company. Like, the church has condemned this for how many years? Like, since the beginning. The Council of Nicaea, where Jesus was proclaimed to be fully man, fully God, also condemned usury. And it's like, that's a Catholic investment firm. What about the Knights of Columbus? What do they have for their retirement accounts?
That's two names.
It's two names.
Google.
Google's on there.
Alphabet Inc. Yeah.
Amazon's on there. I mean, the destruction of the proper middle class, the ownership class, is absolutely abolished by the investments of Catholics. And then you even have to go even further back, even beyond this, and say, why do we even have a type of stock market in the way that we do? You don't have the ability to put money into these companies because you really believe in what they're doing, because you want to give them some money to continue their mission.
To do good. Yeah.
Yeah. You want them to make you money.
Right.
It is a medium for greed. It's the same thing of saying, I want to have this money so that I just have more of it.
You're blowing my mind, because you're blackpilling me. That thing. Because I'm realizing I can critique Google, don't be evil, but that's essentially what we want out of so-called Catholic investing. What do I want? Well, I want a company that's going to invest my money for me, and they're going to avoid porn and abortion and all the bad things that I don't like.
Yep.
It's like, buddy, that's okay. That's a mitigation of an evil, sure. But you are wide open for sins of omission, because what are you doing? You're saying okay, essentially you're saying that there's some things that are really bad that I want to avoid, but you're still investing money without actually knowing what it's doing.
Yeah.
You're right back to this lack of personal virtue. You're right back to this systems will take care of my money for me. And your motivation, you're right, is entirely the money that you get back, and not at all the activities of the company itself. I mean, if you can look yourself in the eye and say, hey, I'm making good returns on my investments because Amazon is thriving. If you as a Catholic can look yourself in the eye and say, I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing God's holy work, I don't know what to say to you.
Ill-formed. I would look you in the eye and say, you are ill-formed.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's generous.
I'd give him a hug afterwards.
That's even more generous. You're getting to heaven, man. You're going to have to pull me up from purgatory.
I don't know if I'm there yet. Because
I was thinking about stabbing them with a little penknife in the calf. So you see.
Hey. They might not know why you did it, but they know that there's something.
They won't know. I'll be running away after I do it.
Anyways. Yeah. So, but it really does. I mean, also just one last thing along on this rant is that people might say, "Well, I'm making this money for a good end," but then you got to deal with St. Paul, who says, "Let us not do ill, that good might come from it." In Romans. So this is really a complete reformation of one's way of life. I mean, you find this when Christ goes out to his baptism. Everybody says, if John is baptizing people into a baptism of repentance, then why did Christ go, who was sinless? And, he was really being baptized for what repentance means truly and most profoundly, and at the etymological level of a changing of one's mind, which is one's will, which is one's heart, which is one's soul, which is one's actions as well. He left the city. He did not participate in the social order of the people anymore. Did he sin while he was in the social order? No, of course he didn't. Was his intention when he came to earth to allow that social order to remain once he was done with it? Absolutely not. He came to topple Caesar, but not with a sword.
Yeah.
And so where does he go right after his baptism? He goes further into the wilderness. He goes being tempted by the strong man himself, by his great enemy, the one who does prop up Satan, or does prop up Caesar, and that is Satan. And this is what Christ has called all of us to, into this complete repentance of the social order that we've been living in.
Yeah, and maybe one way to make a practical suggestion here is that once
delete your Peter Pan account. That's one. Yeah.
That's 3 names. Oh my gosh, this guy! It's like this trail of destruction behind him. Okay, one thing that I would suggest is that there's a lot of hope that comes from following Christ, and once you take the difficult burden of beneficence on you.
Yeah.
That says, okay, I can't just avoid evil and make money on avoiding evil. Like I have got to do good.
Yep.
I've got to know what the money is for.
Yep.
And then spend it for that thing. Right. Like, and it involves work on your part.
Oh,
you can't be lazy anymore.
Yep.
Right. But there's a real excitement here, because one thing you can do with your money is invest it in an actual company that you actually want to succeed.
Yes.
Right? So say that in your town, someone's got a great idea to do composting, to do like a big kind of industrial composting, keep trash out of landfills, and you're excited about that. And you're turning it into soil, and the soil is going in the gardens, and you want to invest in it. Do it. Give the compost man your money, right? And you can even, as part of that risk, I'm pretty sure Aquinas at least is with me on this one, as part of that risk, you can work to get your money back.
Yeah, it has to be a real risk, though.
Yeah.
I mean, people often say today that all investments are risky to some degree or level, and therefore you can always get your money back on things. But that is often just a stupid claim for usury. Like, I'm going to give this person money so he can buy a house, but I might not get it back from him. He might not pay me back, and therefore I can charge interest on it. It's like, no, that's evil, wrong, and depraved.
No, you're getting it back.
But
that's why the government bails you out at the end of it.
Yeah, exactly. But if there's a real, like, that compost thing really might not take off.
Yeah.
Like, you could really lose the money that you're putting on. So it's exciting. It's adventurous. It means that you have to work really hard, and probably you're going to be working with that guy more. Right. It's like your money and your time and your labors are actually all going to be unified together, rather than just tossing some money in an investment account and not really knowing what people are doing with it actively.
Totally.
It's like your person is now going to be more involved.
Yeah, and we talk about this a lot, like that there's this need to turn to the local as the actual place where our power is most efficacious, right? To do politics better, harder, stronger, more, instead of sort of just offering ourselves up to the motions of systems that we aren't really taking part in. And as much as you can say that about politics, you can say that about money, right? Like, we need to actually use it where it's efficacious and powerful. One of the cool things about having a kind of no-go on just blanket stock investment sort of behavior, which is just the American way of life, is that it turns you to the local, right? Because like you're saying, if you now have both a risk and a real love at stake in an investment, right? Then you sure as hell aren't going to do it in California where you don't know the guy. You know what I'm saying? Like,
absolutely.
Unless you're in California, in which case move. No, I mean, in which case it doesn't apply. But if you're going to turn to the local because you have now a new loyalty and a love and a risk and a fear that you're actually more of a master of. And yeah, it does mean more labor, which is probably why we don't want to do it. But here's an idea. If you don't want to do more work, just don't do more work. Don't also try to make money on not doing work.
Wealth without work is one of these first and primary economic sins. You know, like once you separate Adam's toil in the garden, because work is primary. It's prelapsarian. It's before the fall. It was something that God ordained.
Keeping and tilling, baby.
Keeping and tilling, baby. We should get shirts that say that. Actually, keeping and tilling. And there's proper fruits and overabundant fruits that come from that work. But to be able to say, we need to be able to separate the laborer from his wealth without him really knowing that it's being separated, which is what happens in a lot of these top-down investments, or even just in changing money prices, as the Fed does all the time. It's like, if you don't know this, you need to know this, is that whenever the price of money changes, you are doing work for others for free. Okay, we'll come back to that later.
That was like the Joe Biden thing.
Yeah, I'm there for you. Anyway.
You're all sitting at the table at home, just clenching each other's hands with your bony little fingers, and you're worried, and you're dying inside with worry.
And you're reaching across the pillow, and all you grab is pillow.
Biden will save us.
Yeah, he will. He will.
He's going to ban usury. He said that in that stump speech in, was it North Carolina or South Carolina?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't see that. Yeah,
he said total ban on usury. It's going to be huge.
Oh, that is going to be great for us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, true Catholic.
Yep.
True Catholic.
Yep.
Anyways, I can't really remember where we were going.
You got really off track. You were saying...
top-down investments. Yeah, this is a real problem, is that once you try and... I mean, there's a double sin here with this whole idea of wealth without work. Mm-hmm. One, that means somebody is working, and you're separating him from his own wealth. The other thing is that it actually malforms your own soul, which again comes back to the virtues and to beneficence, is that we are trying to get to heaven. This is the whole a point of these conversations, of the economy at large, is to, if politics and political economy is about your interactions with one another, then it ultimately comes down to how well are you loving your neighbors.
Yep, you're right, man.
All right, so next time we're going to talk about liberality.
Oh, no, that wasn't even a good summary, though. we got. Okay,
summarize it.
Well, the point is
do good in summarizing.
Yeah, that's the thing. Okay, this is the point. Jesus changes everything, and that includes money. And the way that he changes money is, he says, orient it all towards blessing others, right? So that you yourself might be saved in the process, and so you can actively build the kingdom of heaven here. And this is in contradistinction and in opposition to the ways of the nations, right, who use money as a way to bolster human power, to amass human power. It's a tool for some men appearing as gods over other men, as opposed to some men being able to get rid of their money, to separate themselves from it, and thereby appear as the true God who gives even unto giving his only son. That's the system that we're talking about. Now, the virtues are the perfections of our soul by which we participate in that, right? We become those kinds of givers. And the point of beneficence, that fundamental orientation to always doing good, to never settling for a neutral, I'm not going to do evil today attitude, right? The whole point of it is that I totally forgot what I was going to say. Oh, no. The whole point of it is that it puts you, into the adventure of human life and of building up the kingdom of heaven, right? Yeah. Where every act has a purpose, where your goal is always in plain sight, right? And that if we can perfect ourselves in this fundamental attitude, right? That we are way more, we're fertile soil, as it were, for the other virtues that are going to build up on this fundamental willingness, disposition to do good. And that is where we're going next, right? We're going to talk about the virtues that more specifically have to do with the different ways we deal with different lumps of cash. Yep. We're
going to talk about the Catholic principle of how the idea is not teach a man how to fish, or it's not even give a man a fish, and it's not even give a man a fish while you teach him how to fish, though that's really good and a lot closer. But it's give a man a fishing rod.
Give a man a fishing rod. It means to his fishy production.
It's going to be awesome.
Okay, well, thanks so much for joining us. A new polity podcast. We need a new name. And I am really happy, Jacob, that you could walk me through some of this, because I tell you, I started this conversation pretty negative. I think I talked about dying too much for mom and dad.
Trying to make it up with Merry Christmas.
But Christmas is coming. We're all going to get through this. So remember, guys, we're all in this together.